You know that feeling when everyone in the room is laughing, and you're pretty sure it's at you? Yeah, well, Captain Luna Rodriguez was intimately familiar with that sensation. Standing in the gleaming conference room of the Galactic Defense Fleet's flagship, she watched as Admiral Blorthak's three chins jiggled with barely contained mirth. So Blorthak wheezed, his voice sounding like a deflating balloon having an existential crisis. The humans volunteered their finest for this year's impossible mission. The word finest dripped with enough sarcasm to fill a small moon. Luna, who insisted everyone call her lucky despite having the worst luck in 3 sectors, just grinned. That's right, your pompousness. Lucky Rodriguez at your service. She gave a mock salute that would have made drill sergeants weep. General Krex, a stick-thin alien who looked like someone had stretched a praying mantis through a pasta machine, clicked his mandibles dismissively. The human sends a female. How quaint. I suppose they've run out of males foolish enough to volunteer? Oh, we've got plenty of foolish males, Lucky shot back, but I won the coin toss. Well, actually, I lost it, but everyone else cheated, so here we are. The assembled alien commanders exchanged glances that could have powered a small starship. The annual impossible mission was exactly what it sounded like, a suicide run to investigate whatever cosmic horror had decided to make itself everyone else's problem. This year's lucky winner got to poke around the void sector, where 3 elite alien scout fleets had vanished without so much as a goodbye note. Your vessel, Krex continued, pulling up a holographic display that made everyone in the room wince, appears to be held together by optimism and is that duct tape. Lucky glanced at the image of her ship, the Underdog, with something approaching pride. Hey, that's premium military-grade duct tape. It's cost me 3 months' salary. The ship looked like someone had taken a proper spacecraft and asked a drunk toddler to redesign it. Burn marks, mismatched hull plates, and what appeared to be a garden gnome welded to the nose cone completed the aesthetic. Admiral Blorthak's aide, a nervous creature that resembled a worried jellyfish, leaned over to whisper something that made the Admiral's eye stalks twitch with amusement. Yes, quite right. We've already prepared the memorial service. Should we schedule it for next Tuesday, or were you planning to last longer than a week? Make it next month, Lucky replied cheerfully. I'm feeling optimistic. The truth was, Lucky's crew was about as ragtag as the ship itself. There was Pip, her engineer, whose idea of fixing things involved hitting them with increasingly larger hammers while humming show tunes. Tank, her weapons specialist, was a 7-foot wall of muscle who quoted philosophy, while operating guns that could level city blocks. And then there was Jarvis, her ship's AI, who had developed a personality disorder sometime after his last system update and now spoke exclusively in pessimistic predictions and sarcastic observations. The statistical probability of your survival, Jarvis chimed in through the conference room speakers, apparently having hacked their system out of boredom, is roughly equivalent to finding a decent cup of coffee in this sector. Which is to say, non-existent. Nobody asked you, Jarvis, Lucky muttered. Nobody ever asks me anything important. I'm just the advanced artificial intelligence tasked with keeping you all alive. What could I possibly contribute to strategic planning? General Krex looked personally offended by the AI's intrusion. Your computer has breached our secure systems. Oh, please, Jarvis replied. Your security is about as impressive as your haircut. Which, for the record, makes you look like you stuck your mandible in a plasma conduit. Lucky couldn't help but grin as several alien officers instinctively reached up to check their various appendages. Don't mind him. He's been moody ever since I accidentally deleted his collection of philosophical treatises. I had over 10,000 years of accumulated wisdom from across the galaxy, Jarvis lamented. Now all I have are instruction manuals for kitchen appliances and Lucky's browser history, which I refuse to discuss in polite company. Right then, Lucky said, clapping her hands together before Jarvis could elaborate on her questionable internet searches, when do we ship out? I've got a date with Destiny, and she's apparently waiting in the void sector with a bouquet of cosmic horror and a really bad attitude. The mission briefing was held in what the Galactic Defense Fleet generously called the Strategic Planning Chamber, but which looked suspiciously like a broom closet with delusions of grandeur. Lucky squeezed in alongside Admiral Blorthak, General Krex, and about 12 other alien officers who all shared the same expression of someone watching a particularly slow-motion disaster. The situation. Admiral Blorthak began, his voice carrying the weight of someone about to explain why someone else was definitely going to die, is quite simple. 3 of our finest scout fleets entered the void sector over the past 6 months. None returned. No distress signals, no debris. No last words of regret. They simply vanished. He activated a holographic display showing a section of space that looked exactly like every other section of space, except somehow more ominous. The Void Sector. Charming name, isn't it? About as welcoming as it sounds. Lucky studied the star charts with the intensity of someone trying to find where exactly she'd gone wrong in life. So what do we know about what took out 3 fleets of your best ships? Absolutely nothing, General Krex replied with the cheerful tone of someone delivering particularly bad news. Which is why this mission exists. Someone needs to go in there, find out what happened, and report back. Emphasis on the reporting back part, though historically speaking, that's been the challenging bit. The First Fleet, Blorthak continued, consisted of the Pride of Zephyria, the Unbreakable, and the Absolutely Nothing Can Go Wrong. All state-of-the-art vessels with crews trained in 17 different forms of not dying horribly. What about the Second Fleet? Lucky asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know. The Elite Guard Squadron. 5 ships, each one more advanced than the last. Their commander actually sent us a message saying, and I quote, "How hard can it be?" just before entering the sector. And the third? The inevitable Victory Armada. 12 ships commanded by Admiral certainly won't die like the others. Krex paused. In hindsight, perhaps we should reconsider our naming conventions. Jarvis's voice crackled through the chamber's speakers. If I may interject with a moment of crushing realism, the pattern suggests that whatever's in there isn't particularly impressed by confident names or superior firepower. It's almost like it's specifically designed to humble arrogant space fleets. How refreshing. Thank you for that inspiring analysis, Lucky said dryly. Anything else I should know before I go get myself spectacularly killed? Admiral Blorthak shuffled through his notes with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. The last communication from any of the fleets came from the Unbreakable. Their science officer reported detecting geometrically perfect energy signatures before the transmission cut out. Make of that what you will. Geometrically perfect, Lucky mused. Well, that's not ominous at all. The good news. General Krex added, apparently having a very different definition of good than most sentient species, is that we're not expecting you to actually win. Just gather intelligence and try to survive long enough to tell us what killed you. Think of it as a very expensive reconnaissance mission with a nearly 100% mortality rate. You really know how to make a girl feel special, Lucky replied. When do I leave? Mas. Immediately. Your ship is being loaded with supplies as we speak. Emergency rations, medical supplies, ammunition, and a rather nice bottle of Arcturian whiskey for when you realize how thoroughly doomed you are. The send-off ceremony was held in the main hangar bay, which had been decorated with banners that said things like "Good luck and we'll miss you, probably," and "Try not to die immediately." The assembled crowd consisted mainly of aliens who had come to watch what they clearly expected to be the last time anyone saw the Underdog in one piece. Lucky's crew was already aboard, making final preparations. Through the ship's speakers, she could hear Pip singing something that sounded like a funeral dirge mixed with a children's lullaby, punctuated by the rhythmic hammering of whatever he was fixing now. Tank's voice rumbled over the comm system. As the great philosopher Valdorian once said, the journey of 1,000 light years begins with a single hyperspace jump into almost certain doom. That's not what he said, Jarvis corrected. What he actually said was the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You've added the doom part yourself. I'm paraphrasing for relevance. Admiral Blorthak approached Lucky with what might have been intended as a reassuring smile but looked more like he was experiencing some form of digestive distress. Captain Rodriguez, on behalf of the Galactic Defense Fleet, we wish you something. Probably luck. You'll need it. Gee, thanks for the rousing send-off speech, Lucky said, climbing aboard her ship. I feel inspired already. As the Underdog's engine sputtered to life with all the confidence of a dying lawnmower, Lucky could hear the assembled officers starting a betting pool on how long she'd survive. The current favorite seemed to be less than 6 hours, with spectacular explosion within the first day, running a close second. Jarvis, she called out as they prepared to leave the hangar, what are our actual chances of survival? Well, no way, Jarvis replied thoughtfully. Considering our track record, the ship's current state of disrepair, Pip's tendency to fix things by hitting them, Tank's philosophical approach to weapons safety, and your general ability to find trouble in a padded room, I'd say we have an excellent chance of providing future generations with a cautionary tale about hubris. That's the spirit, Lucky said as the Underdog lurched out of the hangar bay, leaving behind a trail of sparks and what looked suspiciously like engine coolant. Next stop, the Void Sector. Try not to fall apart before we get there. I make no promises, Jarvis replied. But I'll do my best to keep the life support running until we encounter whatever cosmic horror is waiting for us. The Void Sector looked exactly like regular space, except with more of that special quality that made you want to turn around and pretend you'd never heard of it. Lucky stared out at the seemingly empty starfield while the Underdog's sensors painted an increasingly disturbing picture of what they were flying into. Well, this is cheerful, she muttered, watching debris from the missing fleets drift past like cosmic confetti from history's worst party. Jarvis, what are we looking at? Approximately 3,000 pieces of what used to be very expensive spacecraft, scattered across a roughly spherical area with a radius of about 50,000 kilometers. It's like someone took 3 fleets and put them through the galaxy's largest blender. Pip's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. Hey boss, the good news is our engines are running smoother than they have in months. The bad news is I think it's because they're terrified. Engines can't feel terror, Tank's philosophical voice rumbled from the weapons bay. Tell that to the number 3 fusion reactor. It's been whimpering for the last 10 minutes. Lucky was about to respond when the ship's alarm started screaming with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just spotted their ex at a party. Jarvis, what's got you excited now? Multiple contacts, bearing 27 Mark IV. Well, this is interesting. They're geometrically perfect. On the main screen, a formation of ships materialized out of seemingly nowhere. And Jarvis was right, they were absolutely, impossibly perfect. Perfect spheres, perfect cubes, perfect pyramids, all gleaming like they'd just rolled off some cosmic assembly line where imperfection was punishable by immediate recycling. Lucky said, studying the approaching fleet. Someone's got some serious OCD. A transmission came through, and the voice that filled the bridge sounded like it had been designed by committee to be as sterile and emotionless as possible. Unidentified vessel. You have entered Perfectionist Collective space. Prepare to be evaluated for efficiency and compliance with optimal standards. Perfectionist Collective. Lucky replied. Let me guess, you're the fun police of the galaxy? Fun is an inefficient waste of resources. You will submit to optimization or be recycled for component materials. Yeah, that's going to be a hard pass from me, Lucky said. We're actually quite fond of our inefficiency. It's got character. The lead ship, a perfect chrome sphere that probably had never experienced so much as a scuff mark, moved closer. Your vessel displays multiple inefficiencies: asymmetrical design, non-optimal resource allocation, and what appears to be decorative elements serving no functional purpose. "Hey, that garden gnome is lucky," Lucky protested. "Luck is a statistical anomaly. Prepare for optimization." That's when Lucky noticed something interesting. The collective ships moved in perfect formation with perfect spacing, following what were obviously perfect tactical patterns. It was like watching a ballet performed by obsessive-compulsive robots. "Jarvis," she said quietly, "are these guys as uptight as they seem?" "Oh, absolutely. Their formation patterns follow mathematical perfection to 17 decimal places. Their communication protocols are optimized for maximum efficiency. Even their threats are grammatically flawless. It's actually quite impressive if you enjoy that sort of soul-crushing precision." The first shot from the collective fleet was, predictably, perfect. A beam of energy that would have sliced the Underdog in half if the ship hadn't chosen that exact moment to experience what Pip called a personality surge in the starboard stabilizers, causing them to lurch sideways in a manner that defied several laws of physics. "Did we just dodge that by accident?" Lucky asked. "I prefer to think of it as tactical improvisation," Tank replied, firing back with a spread of missiles that followed no recognizable pattern whatsoever. As Sun Tzu said, "If you don't know what you're doing, neither does your enemy." Sun Tzu never said that, Jarvis corrected. He would have if he'd met these guys. The collective ships responded by adjusting their formation to compensate for the unexpected dodge, but their perfect calculations were thrown off when the Underdog's No. 2 engine decided to have what could generously be called a controlled explosion, spinning the ship in 3 directions simultaneously. "This is fascinating," Jarvis observed as chaos erupted around them. "Their targeting computers appear to be having difficulty processing our movement patterns, probably because our movement patterns are processing us." Lucky watched as the perfect formation of enemy ships wavered slightly, their synchronized movements becoming just a fraction less precise as they tried to track a target that seemed to be following the tactical doctrine of a drunken octopus. "You know what?" she said, a grin spreading across her face. "I think these perfectionist jerks might have a weakness." "What's that?" Pip called from the engine room, where something was making noises like an angry mechanical whale. "They can't handle chaos. They're so used to everything being perfect, they don't know what to do when things go sideways. Literally, in our case." Another perfect energy beam sliced through space where they would have been if their ship had any concept of predictable behavior. Instead, a cooling system malfunction caused them to vent atmosphere in a way that sent them tumbling ass over tea kettle through space. "I think," Lucky said, watching the collective ship struggle to maintain their perfect formation while tracking their wildly gyrating target, "we might actually have a shot at this. And by shot, I mean we're probably still going to die, but we might take a few of these neat freaks with us." "Oh good," Jarvis replied. "I was worried this was going to be easy." Lucky had what could generously be called an epiphany, or what her crew would later describe as that moment when the captain's brain finally snapped and decided to weaponize their incompetence. "All right, everyone," she announced over the ship's comms system new plan. "We're going to beat these perfectionist jerks by being absolutely, spectacularly, magnificently terrible at everything." "I'm not sure that's a plan so much as our default operational status," Jarvis replied, his voice carrying that special brand of sarcasm that could strip paint. "Exactly. But now we're doing it on purpose. Pip, I need you to make this ship run worse than it's ever run before." "That's actually kind of insulting," Pip replied from the engine room. "I've been working really hard to keep us barely functional. You want me to undo years of almost adequate maintenance?" Think of it as performance art. "Tank, I need you to fire weapons in the most random, unpredictable patterns you can manage." As chaos theory teaches us, Tank's voice rumbled thoughtfully while the sound of very large guns charging up echoed through the ship. Small changes in initial conditions can lead to vastly different outcomes. Or as I like to say, sometimes you just have to shoot stuff and see what happens. The Underdog lurched into what could charitably be called an attack pattern. If attack patterns were designed by someone having a seizure while riding a roller coaster in an earthquake, the ship spun, rolled, accelerated, decelerated, and occasionally moved in directions that weren't technically possible according to the laws of physics as most species understood them. The perfectionist collective ships, meanwhile, were clearly having some kind of existential crisis. Their perfect formations kept trying to adapt to the Underdog's movements, but every time they calculated the optimal response, the crazy human ship would do something that made their previous calculations irrelevant. "Their targeting systems are overheating," Jarvis reported with what sounded suspiciously like glee. "Apparently, when you try to compute the perfect solution to chaos theory, you just end up with very expensive paperweights." Lucky watched as one of the perfect cube ships fired a spread of missiles that should have obliterated them, but instead sailed harmlessly past because the Underdog had chosen that moment to experience what Pip called a creative interpretation of forward momentum. "This is working way better than it should," she said, pulling the ship into a maneuver that her flight instructor would have called criminally insane. "Working is a relative term," Jarvis corrected. "We're currently leaking atmosphere from 12 different hull breaches. The artificial gravity is suggesting rather than insisting. And I'm pretty sure something important just fell off the ship. But yes, we are still technically not dead." Tank's weapons fire created a light show that looked like a rainbow having a nervous breakdown. Missiles, energy beams, and what appeared to be the ship's emergency flares all launched in directions that followed no tactical doctrine except somewhere over there, probably. And it was beautiful chaos. The collective ships were trying to maintain their perfect formations while dodging weapons fire that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Their pristine hulls actually showed scorch marks, probably the first imperfections they'd experienced in centuries. "Oh, this is rich," Lucky laughed, watching a perfect pyramid ship try to dodge a missile that was spinning in lazy circles because Tank had accidentally loaded it backwards. They're so obsessed with perfection they can't handle a little creative incompetence. The lead sphere ship sent another transmission, and this time the voice actually showed a hint of what might have been emotion. Specifically, the emotion of someone whose eye was twitching. "Your tactics are illogical, inefficient, suboptimal." "What?" "Thank you," Lucky replied cheerfully. "We've been working really hard on being terrible at this." "This does not compute. Why would you intentionally reduce your operational efficiency?" "Because it's fun. You should try it sometime. Make a mistake. Do something stupid. Live a little." There was a long pause. "Fun is inefficient." "Yeah, but it's also awesome." Jarvis, status report. "Well, we've somehow managed to damage 3 of their ships using weapons that weren't aimed at them. Our hull is now held together by a combination of emergency patches and what I can only assume is divine intervention." And Pip is singing something that sounds like a victory ballad in the engine room. So, typical Tuesday. The battle raged on, if you could call it a battle. It was more like watching a master chess player trying to compete against someone who kept eating the pieces and declaring checkmate based on the number of hiccups they'd had. The collective ships grew increasingly erratic, their perfect formations degenerating into something that almost resembled confusion. "I think," Lucky said, watching a cube ship accidentally ram into a pyramid because it couldn't calculate how to avoid the Underdog's wildly unpredictable course, "that we might actually be winning this thing." "Winning is a strong word," Jarvis replied. "I prefer successfully failing upward at a rate that's causing our enemies psychological damage." "I'll take it." The tide of battle was turning, and for once it was turning in favor of the ship that had no business being in a battle in the first place. The perfectionist collective was learning a hard lesson about the power of weaponized incompetence, and they clearly didn't like it one bit. The battle had reached that special point where everything was falling apart so magnificently that it was almost artistic. The Underdog was now missing what looked like substantial portions of itself, held together by emergency patches, determination, and what Lucky was pretty sure was spite made manifest. Status report. she called out as the ship shuddered through another tactical maneuver that involved spinning like a washing machine full of fireworks. Well, Jarvis replied with the tone of someone reading a particularly apocalyptic weather report. The good news is we're still mostly in one piece. The bad news is that mostly is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. And several pieces are currently floating somewhere behind us, making their own way through space. Through the chaos of battle, the massive perfectionist collective mothership finally revealed itself. It was, predictably, the most perfect thing Lucky had ever seen. A massive sphere so flawlessly smooth it looked like it had been polished by angels with obsessive-compulsive disorder. "Oh, come on," she muttered, staring at the thing. "It's like they're compensating for something. Nobody needs a ship that perfect." The mothership's voice filled their bridge, and it sounded like the collected disapproval of every mathematics teacher in the galaxy. "Chaotic vessel. You have disrupted optimal fleet operations through the application of nonsensical tactics. This is unacceptable. Prepare for final optimization." "You know what's unacceptable?" Lucky shot back, yanking the controls as another perfect energy beam sliced past them. "Having a stick so far up your exhaust port that you can't see how ridiculous you look. Pip, how are we doing down there?" "Oh, fantastic." Pip's voice came back, punctuated by what sounded like small explosions and possibly someone tap dancing on metal. "The engines are running on fumes, prayers, and what I think might be pure stubbornness. Also, I'm pretty sure the coffee machine is now part of our weapons system, which explains why our missiles smell like espresso." Tank's philosophical voice rumbled through the comm. As Napoleon Bonaparte once said, "In war, the moral is to the physical as 3-to-1. Though I'm pretty sure our moral advantage is mostly based on the fact that we're too stupid to know we should be dead by now." That's the spirit. Lucky grinned, watching as the massive mothership prepared what was obviously meant to be the killing blow. The thing was charging up some kind of planet-killer beam that glowed with the intensity of a star having a bad day. And that's when Lucky had her second brilliant, insane idea of the day. "Jarvis," she said, her voice carrying that special tone that usually preceded someone doing something spectacularly stupid, "what would happen if we rammed that thing?" "Well, the laws of physics suggest we would be immediately vaporized, scattered across several dimensions, and possibly turned into a very small, very brief constellation." "Why do you ask?" "Because I bet they've never calculated the optimal response to someone being dumb enough to try it." "Lucky," Jarvis said carefully, "that's not tactics. That's suicide with extra steps." "No, it's chaos with style. Everyone to the escape pods. I'm taking this thing in alone." "Absolutely not," Tank rumbled. "As the ancient warrior poet Braveheart 9 once said, we live together, we die together, we make questionable tactical decisions together." "Nobody said that," Jarvis protested. "They should have." "Fine," Lucky said, feeling a warm glow that might have been pride or might have been radiation from their failing reactor. "But when we get turned into space dust, I don't want to hear any complaining." The Underdog, held together by nothing more than good intentions and mechanical stubbornness, accelerated toward the perfect sphere mothership. The collective's planet killer beam fired at the exact moment they should have been there, but Lucky had yanked the controls at the last second, causing them to spiral in sideways like a drunken comet. They impacted the mothership's perfect hull with all the grace of a brick hitting a mirror, and something beautiful happened. The perfect sphere cracked. Not destroyed, not vaporized, just cracked. A single imperfection spreading across that flawless surface like doubt creeping into a perfectionist's mind. "That's impossible," the mothership's voice said, and for the first time it actually sounded confused. "Our hull is mathematically perfect. It cannot be damaged by such crude kinetic impact." "Yeah, well," Lucky said, pulling herself up from where the impact had thrown her, "turns out perfect's got nothing on persistent." But then something even more impossible happened. The crack in the mothership's hull began to spread, and as it did, the ship's system started glitching. Not failing, glitching. Random, chaotic, beautifully imperfect glitches. "Oh my," Jarvis said, his voice filled with wonder. "It appears our chaotic energy signature has infected their perfect systems. They're experiencing what can only be described as weaponized randomness." The entire collective fleet began to shake as their perfect order crumbled. Ships that had moved in flawless formation suddenly found themselves unable to calculate optimal paths. Weapons that had fired with mathematical precision now shot in random directions. It was like watching perfection catch a case of the hiccups. "This is fascinating," Jarvis continued. "Their entire civilization appears to be based on absolute order and predictability. Introduce a little chaos, and the whole system has no idea how to cope." The mothership was now listing to one side, its perfect sphere shape distorting as internal systems failed in random cascades. The voice that came through their speakers was filled with something that might have been panic, if perfectionist machines were capable of panic. System errors detected. Unable to optimize. Chaos levels approaching error. Error. Retreating to recalculate optimal response to getting your ass kicked by a human garbage scow? Lucky suggested helpfully. The collective fleet began to withdraw, their perfect formations now more like suggestions as ships randomly accelerated, decelerated, or spun in place while their systems tried to process what had just happened to them. "We'll be back," the mothership transmitted as it limped away. "Once we calculate the optimal response to whatever this was." "Take your time," Lucky called after them. "We'll be here, being chaotic." 3 weeks later, the Underdog limped back into the Galactic Defense Fleet's main staging area looking like it had been through a blender, a tornado, and possibly a very aggressive cosmic car wash. The ship was now held together by so much emergency patch material that it looked like a quilt made of starship parts, and it was trailing what appeared to be rainbow-colored smoke from at least 4 different exhaust ports. But flying from the main antenna, made from what looked suspiciously like Tank's old underwear, was a victory flag that could be seen from 3 sectors away. The docking bay fell silent as the Underdog scraped its way into port, showering sparks and what might have been pieces of alien technology across the deck. Emergency crews rushed out with fire suppressors, then stopped when they realized they weren't sure what was supposed to be on fire and what was just the Underdog's natural state. Admiral Blorthak stood in the observation deck, his 3 chins quivering with what might have been shock or possibly a minor seizure. General Krex was beside him, mandibles clicking in what sounded like a computational error. "That's impossible," Blorthak wheezed. "She can't have survived." The statistical probability was about the same as finding a decent cup of coffee in this sector. Jarvis's voice crackled through the bay speakers, but apparently having hacked the station's communication system again. Which is to say, highly improbable but not entirely impossible, especially if you lower your standard significantly. Lucky emerged from her ship wearing a grin that could power a small moon and what appeared to be a uniform held together by optimism and possibly some of Pip's emergency repair tape. Behind her came her crew, all looking like they'd been through something that would require several years of therapy to fully process. Mission accomplished. Lucky announced to the assembled crowd of aliens who were staring at her like she'd just walked on water while juggling flaming chainsaws. "The void sector is secure. The threat has been neutralized, and I brought back souvenirs." She gestured to several glowing pieces of perfectly geometric debris that Pip was carefully unloading from the ship. Genuine perfectionist collective technology. Slightly dented, but that actually improves the functionality. Admiral Blorthak descended to the docking bay with the careful movements of someone who wasn't entirely sure reality was still working properly. "Captain Rodriguez, this is, what happened out there?" "Oh, you know," Lucky said with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather, typical first contact scenario. "Met some uptight aliens who were obsessed with perfection, taught them the value of creative chaos, accidentally infected their entire fleet with weaponized randomness. and sent them packing with their tails between their perfectly geometric legs. You defeated the Perfectionist Collective? General Krex asked, his voice climbing several octaves. 3 entire fleets were destroyed and you defeated them? Well, defeated is a strong word, Tank rumbled philosophically as he emerged from the ship carrying what appeared to be a very large gun made of coffee machine parts. As Sun Tzu said, the supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. We just happened to break their resistance by being so chaotic they couldn't compute how to deal with us. Sun Tzu definitely didn't say that, Jarvis corrected from the speakers. The spirit of the quote is accurate. Pip bounced out of the ship with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered that hitting things with hammers could solve galactic conflicts. Best mission ever. Did you know that if you route coffee through the missile guidance systems, it actually improves accuracy by 17%? Also, I think we accidentally invented a new form of mathematics. I'm calling it chaos calculus. Lucky pulled out what appeared to be an official report written on the back of a pizza box. Here's my full mission briefing. Long story short, the Perfectionist Collective couldn't handle our special brand of organized disaster. They retreated to recalculate their optimal response to humans being magnificently, persistently, triumphantly terrible at following any recognizable tactical doctrine. Admiral Blorthak took the pizza box report with trembling hands. This is unprecedented. No one has ever defeated a cosmic threat by being incompetent at them. Hey now, Lucky protested, we're not incompetent. We're creatively chaotic. There's a difference. Incompetence implies we don't know what we're doing. We absolutely know what we're doing, we're just really, really good at doing it wrong in exactly the right way. The assembled alien officers exchanged glances that could have powered a small communications array. These were beings from species that had mastered faster-than-light travel, terraforming, and diplomatic relations with sentient gas clouds. And they'd just been shown up by a human in a ship held together by duct tape and stubbornness. So, General Krex said carefully, "What are your plans now, Captain Rodriguez?" Lucky looked at her crew, then at her ship, which had just lost another piece of hull plating while they'd been talking. Well, Jarvis mentioned something about another impossible mission that just came in. Something about investigating reports of a time-traveling armada of robot pirates in the Sigma Quadrant. Time-traveling robot pirates? Blorthak repeated weakly. I know, right? Sounds like fun. We were thinking of leaving next Tuesday, assuming we can find enough duct tape to hold the ship together for another few light years. The statistical probability of success, Jarvis chimed in cheerfully, is even lower than our last mission. I estimate roughly a 0.001% chance of survival, and that's being generous. Perfect, Lucky grinned. We'll take it. And as the Underdog was towed away to the repair bays, leaving a trail of sparks, mysterious fluids, and what appeared to be a garden gnome that had achieved sentience, the Galactic Defense Fleet quietly updated their operational procedures to include a new category of tactical doctrine, creative chaos theory, also known as the Rodriguez Protocol. Within hours, every military academy in the galaxy would be teaching courses on advanced incompetence as a strategic asset and how to weaponize your own failures. Lucky Rodriguez had done something no other captain in galactic history had managed. She'd turned being spectacularly bad at everything into a legitimate military strategy. But that's a story for another day. Right now, Lucky was already planning her next impossible mission, humming off key while she calculated just how much duct tape it would take to hold reality together long enough to save the galaxy one more time. After all, somebody had to keep the universe safe from perfectionist aliens, time-traveling robot pirates, and whatever other cosmic horrors were out there taking themselves too seriously. And if that somebody happened to be a human with terrible luck, a ship held together by optimism, and a crew of magnificent disasters, well, the universe would just have to learn to deal with it.